My studio is the space where I get creative. It's where I make my projects for these videos, where I spend, for the most part, 7 days a week. And it's an absolute disaster zone. Some people say they like the chaos of it. My problem is I can't get a lot of my projects done because I spend too much time digging for stuff I know I have here somewhere. So it's really time that I have to get to the biggest part of my revamp project that I started this time last year and turn it from this to this much cleaner and more organized studio space that I think looks a lot better, but should also allow me to achieve a lot more projects in a timelier manner, meaning more videos for you folks. It's not all roses and rainbows to get to this point though. Now, if only it was as simple as snapping my fingers to get this all cleaned up and straightened up. This space has become a disaster zone in the studio. My ADD is always telling me, after this one project, we'll clean, and it just never happens. That's a discussion for therapy though. These shelves, that's for this video. They've served me well to this point, but they have to go. They end up cluttered with stuff, piled, and the things that are at the back I can never find, so I don't really make maximum use of the space that's here, and when I need something, I can't find it. I'll be in the middle of a project knowing I have that spare part somewhere on these shelves, and I can't find it, so I end up ordering a new one. It's totally wasteful, and it's time to get some drawers in here, which is why in comes the most efficient way I could come up with to add drawers to that side of the studio, these toolboxes, which I did purchase. They weren't provided to me. There was a whole go around with one of them coming in damaged. It was not a great experience. I did heavily consider building my own boxes with all new drawer slides and everything, but the price would add up really quickly, and I'm not really set up for that depth of woodworking yet. Clearly, I've already started the cleanup process and getting organized, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Let's get diving right into building the new configuration. A quick side note, I think the Voron 2.4 and Mercury 1.1 look so good sitting next to each other, and that's probably how they're going to end up in the final configuration. What do you think? And of course, I have barely begun this project and already the scope has changed. Originally, I just intended to replace the shelving units that I had with the toolboxes and have a pretty direct one-to-one swap. But I quickly realized that this workbench that I'm sitting on now has always felt like a bit of a dark hole behind me. I've never found a way to light it that I like. It's always felt a little claustrophobic, like I'm hitting my head right now. It needs to go so that I can replace it with that full 15-foot long, wide open workbench that you saw at the beginning of this video. So my buddy Evan and I are moving it out of the way in the studio so I can get a nice open blank slate to start with. And there is so little room in here right now to turn around, move around, work. It is not fun. It's amazing how fast 600 square feet turns into just a walking path. Now with a blank slate behind me, yes, this is the wall that was my backdrop previously, I've got some space to stick frame out the wall. I'm going to be insulating this both to help insulate the space a little bit better, but also to cut down on sound because I'll be using Rockwool Safe and Sound, which is a sound absorbing as well as thermally insulating material. I have framed out walls on this channel before, and this is a super basic one, so I will come back when I actually have some more interesting stuff to discuss, like power and network considerations that I'm taking into account with this wall, and then the actual workbench surface that the printers will be on. Let's go! The cost of lumber does inspire me to take a quick moment though and thank my patrons on Patreon and YouTube members here on this platform. Their direct support really allows me to keep coming back week after week and producing new projects so you folks have some videos to see and hopefully learn from or be entertained by at the least. Producing videos the way that I do is a time-intensive process. I have to build the thing, film the thing, and edit the thing. So I greatly appreciate each and every person who supports what it is that I do. If you think you could justify doing so, please head to the link in the description, patreon.com/MandicReally. Now this wall already had a pair of 2-gang 20 amp circuit boxes on it. I'm just moving them to the studs that I framed out here. I'm also adding a single gang box in the middle to have a little more outlets and another circuit here, because I'm working with more powerful and larger printers these days than I was when I first set this space up. So I need to be considering these things. Machines like my Voron 2.4 and Mercury 1.1 combined can pull upwards of 15 amps theoretically if they're both maxed out. So I need to take that into account when I'm plugging things into a wall. You know, when I set up this space, I was running Ender 3s, Prusa Mark 3s, things that only drew 200, 300 watts on their own. Now I've got machines that have double that in bed heater wattage, and I'd like to go even bigger in 2024. That's why now this one wall in my studio has a pair of 20 amp circuits in the fuse box, where the only thing on them is the outlets on this wall, and then a single outlet box that's tied into another 20 amp circuit that has some of my studio lighting on it. So only lower wattage units would be plugged into that one. There are a couple other things I'm also running while I'm here before I close up this wall. I ran 4 Cat 7 cables inside of this wall to some receptacle boxes that'll get keystone jacks. That way, some of my machines can be hardwired into my studio network to reduce the load on the Wi-Fi in here and not rely on it so heavily. And then there's the first bit of 3D printing that's coming into all of this. I've got these Nanlite Pavo tubes. These RGB light strips are always in the background of my shot in the studio, and I love having them, but they each have their own 15-volt DC barrel jack input on them. Instead of running wires up the wall to them or along the top and drop down to them, I've decided to run wires inside of the wall. So I jumped into Fusion 360 and designed up a couple of brackets to hold a receptacle for a DC barrel jack, and now I'll just solder some wire between each one at the bottom, one at the top, and that'll allow me to run just a short jumper wire from the wall to those RGB lights using these receptacles, and all the wiring will be hidden in the wall. I also whipped up a couple of quick wall plates that will go onto the face of those receptacles and has the voltage that they are labeled on them, so that I will always remember not to plug in a 24 volt or 5 volt thing into something that's supposed to be 15 volts or whatever. While I worked on wiring the leads to those barrel jacks so I could install them, Evan worked on putting the rock wool insulation into the wall. It was very helpful to have a second set of hands to get this process rolling a little bit quicker, as it was really dragging on at this point. Now with all the wiring in place, both networking and power, along with the DC power connections and rock wool in place, I have a complete new studded out backdrop wall, including a little extra bracing around the center section for a possible future project. Now, as I've done elsewhere in the studio, I am covering this wall with painter's drop cloth canvas. That'll allow sound waves through to get absorbed into the insulation, and I think it looks all right. With the wall covered, it was on to the platforms that the toolboxes will sit on. There are a couple of reasons to build platforms for the toolboxes. The first one being my floor is really unlevel, as it is a home garage, and it took a lot of shimming and leveling to get this set up so the toolboxes will sit properly and not have Mavity pull the drawers open. In fact, it's so different from end to end of the wall. The right-hand platform is made of 2x3s, while the left-hand one is made of 2x4s. The entire rest of the workbench I have to build solo, so to make it easier on myself, I'm leveling and plumbing up some support pieces all the way across the wall at the proper height and level that I need, so that I can then set the workbench in place a lot easier by myself. The 2x4 that's resting on those pieces right now is not nailed to the wall, it's just resting in place, and that's going to be the back edge of the workbench. This gives you probably an idea of where I'm headed with this. Then I can construct the workbench top sections that'll be over top of the toolboxes, assemble them, and attach them to the back plate that goes against the wall that I just showed you resting in its new home. When I go to install all of this in place, I now have something to set those onto, so they're not just held up there and have to be held in just the right spot. They have a home that I can rest them on and then install them with these 4-inch long structural framing screws. These things are beasts and will really hold this in place, which is exactly what I need because I want minimal support on the front edge of this workbench so it's not obstructed. With the framework securely anchored to the wall, I did install 3 4x4 legs to the front edge so I can further level things and provide support at the front edge. With that frame structure completed, it's top time. In my case, I'm just using some just over 1/2 inch thick plywood, 19/32, and I had it cut to size at the hardware store, so I didn't have to worry about cutting it, dealing with any of that. It's not the most premium surface I could be using, of course, but it's budget friendly, and honestly, it's plenty strong with the amount of structure I have built underneath of it. And with that, I have a wooden top on this workbench that is now 15 foot and 6 inches from end to end. Sorry if my energy levels are dipping quite a bit at this point. I was up till 2 something last night working on this. I've been at this for a couple of days. It's taken a lot more time than I would have hoped for just to build a simple wall on a workbench. But there are a lot of shimming to match the floor level and getting everything exactly to the right measurements so I can slide these toolboxes in there and not have to worry about it. My studio is a disaster zone. I've got to get some paint on this and some RepRacks up on the wall. Previously, I had my double RepRack set up from the design that I created, but there's no shelf to put them on because that's what they're designed to sit on, is a shelf. Now I'm just going to put a regular old RepRack from end to end on this thing, one continuous one. So 15-foot RepRack. I think my studio is going to be dusty for months after this. Let's get to it. I'm starting off with a 45-degree angle bit in my router so that I can chamfer some fairing strips to make my fresh cleats to mount the RepRack to the wall, which does nothing to help reduce the dust in my studio at all. Then it's off to my second makerspace in the house, which has the X-Tool P2 55-watt CO2 laser in it. I loaded up some 6mm black acrylic, and a short time later, I've got some RepRack brackets. I completely forgot to film installing the RepRacks on the wall for you folks. So here they are, up there, ready to run. There are 2 separate racks, technically, that split in the middle, with a total of 8 brackets holding them up. I'll load them up with the filament in a moment, but I wanted to get the LED lights up first. First, I thought about screwing them right to the wall, but then they were too close to really cast good light, so for now anyway, I'm just zip tying them to my RepRacks, which is putting them about where I want, just not the greatest look on things. So I'll probably end up making some brackets that hold them in a very similar position later on. Then finally, my banner can return to its home as the center point of this backdrop. And it's on to everybody's favorite task, sanding, and some more sanding. I did run a router bit along the front edge of this entire workbench to round it over, but I also want to sand that transition, so as I'm leaning up against the bench, resting my arms on it, or sliding things along it, it's not going to be a rough surface. I'm of course not going to get a glass smooth finish on the top of this workbench, but I did want to smooth it out at least a little bit so that it's better and paint will adhere to it better. Then of course, before I can paint, I need to remove the dust from the sanding process. This seemed like the most effective way to get that done, and look silly on camera. A couple of coats of primer and paint later on the base and the top, and I'm ready to move on. I didn't want to bore you with paint application and drying. Now the workbench top is 34 inches deep at the deepest point, but the toolboxes are only 24 inches, so there's dead space behind them where I installed my UPSs that I use to run printers off of in case of power interruption. To transmit that power from the UPS to the machines, I decided to upgrade to some dedicated 14-gauge cables just for this workbench, so that I won't be limited by these cables at the very least, supplying power to even my biggest current machines or future bigger ones. Hint, hint. And the wall being fabric means that I can just feed those cables up between the workbench and the wall without any issues and no holes being drilled. With preparations made, it is toolbox time. I've got to make my way through the maze that is the studio, from the workshop side over to the backdrop side over here, so I can get these toolboxes where they need to be, and the machines that are on this one at least. For installing the toolboxes, I actually removed the wooden tops off of them, as they serve no purpose since there's a workbench above them. Then I had to flip them up so I could remove the wheels from them. You see, those platforms that I built earlier were not just to level the toolboxes, but also to get them just a little bit lower to the ground than the wheels were going to allow, to get my overall workbench height lower as well. I stored the wheels underneath the toolboxes so they're out of the way, but easy to access if I ever need them. A couple of 4x4s were set in front of the platform so the toolbox could be lowered down onto that and be at similar height to the platform it was going to be resting on, and then slid into place where it's going to live. The power strip on the side of the toolbox is going to be barely accessible, but I didn't see any reason to remove it. There's still at least 1 or 2 outlets that can be reached on it. Then the second toolbox was exactly the same process. Wooden top off, wheels off, set the 2x4s, and slide it into place in its little pocket where it's going to be living from now on. With the toolboxes in place, it's time to start organizing. I started by printing some of the Gridfinity grids from Zach Friedman so I could use that as an organizational system in these toolboxes. But then I stopped as I realized it would take too long and I need to get this project done and back to work. But then also, I'm not 100% how this was going to work for my particular needs. If you have stuff from the Gridfinity system you really like, let me know in the comments. Maybe I can apply it moving forward. Where I really began was opening the top drawer on the right-hand side toolbox and loading up the tools that I most commonly use over on this section of the workshop, along with chemicals that I commonly use associated with that, like CA glue and 3D gloop. Then I moved to the left-hand toolbox and opened that top drawer and started putting in the spare electronics for 3D printers that I have. Mainboards, displays, Raspberry Pis, extruders, and hot ends. I have specific project boxes where things that are going to be built and assigned to a project go, but these are all the things that don't have a home at the moment but have potential for future projects. And for right now, that's where I stopped. The studio is still a disaster on the other side of the shop, but I've got other things I've got to move on to right now, and I really need to take my time and plan out the organization. I want drawers dedicated to wiring stuff and connectors, one dedicated to hardware. I want to be able to walk up to one of these toolboxes, pull out a drawer, and immediately know where I'm going to find what I'm looking for. And that's not something that's just going to happen as I throw it together to get a video completed. As it stands, I am thrilled with the way this is turning out. It's got plenty of room to grow and change yet, and I already have some ideas for some serious upgrades to it, but those will be their own dedicated projects for sure. The first time Ruby saw it in its current iteration, she said, "Wow, it looks like a real production studio." Oh, not that it didn't before, but I got what she meant. It feels so much more professional and open, and I just feel better in this space than I did previously. I just have to fight myself to not let it become a cluttered mess all over again. And with that, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for this one, folks. I've got to move on to other projects, make other videos, and get some more machines built out to fill out this shelf a little more thoroughly, along with probably a pretty big change to this background in a future project. Let me know in the comments if you hate this or you have some ideas how I can improve upon it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe you'll enjoy this one where I built the wall behind my desk setup, or this one that YouTube thinks is best for you. Be sure to get subscribed to ensure your 3D prints don't fail. It's not a guarantee, but it can't hurt. See ya, folks.